Taking an aggressive tone, taunting Republicans, saying, quote, "So sue me," as he faces a possible lawsuit from House Speaker John Boehner. But what are the legal hurdles that must be overcome for the president to take Speaker Boehner's threat as a serious legal battle cry? And who better to ask than two lawyers, Robert Schalk, defense attorney and former prosecutor, Ben Levine, a trial attorney. There's been much made over the 9-0, a rare unanimous decision from the Supreme Court, which said that President Obama went beyond his powers in the NRLB case against the Senate. The question is, does that make things easier if the House wants to sue the president?
Well, I think this is the whole point of striking while the iron's hot. And this is a point where the Supreme Court has ruled 9-0 against the president. And if there's going to be a time for Speaker Boehner to file his lawsuit, now may be that time. The only issue I would point out is, in that case, there was a private plaintiff that they could prove had suffered injury. And the biggest issue that we're obviously going to be talking about here is standing, and whether or not the House of Representatives has standing to sue the president in this situation.
Ben, you pointed out Raines v. Byrd, 1997. The Supreme Court basically said Congress can't sue. It's a little bit too far-fetched to get the standing that you need to go in, even if you have a good case. Does things change in this case, or you think Raines v. Byrd stays?
I think Raines v. Byrd is actually going to be used as precedent in any case that John Boehner initiates against President Obama if he cannot find a private plaintiff. That's because in that case, Congress explicitly said that 6 congressmen who challenged the president's line-item veto power, that the congressional power, that the loss of congressional power that they lamented, that injury was wildly abstract and very incredibly dispersed. And one of the requirements of standing is that there's an actual injury. It cannot be abstract. It has to be a particularized injury.
And you say it's very difficult to actually come up with a individual who you can point to in this case, in the immigration case conceivably, that has a real injury.
Right. Speaker Boehner's not even telling anyone what challenge under President Obama's executive orders that he would go after. But I don't think there's any order that he's brought down where he's going to be able to find a private plaintiff. However, if he can prove that no such person exists, he can actually proceed with a lawsuit saying there is no private plaintiff and we will be representing, the plaintiffs in this case. Again, it's very murky waters as to whether or not he's ever going to be successful getting past that.
And I agree with Robert 100%, because all the actions that they're saying that President Obama he overreached on his executive authority, they're benevolent in nature. Unilaterally changing Obamacare, raising minimum wage for federal workers, and like Robert said, immigration reform. It's going to be really hard to find.
You say they're benevolent. A lot of Republicans would not argue. A lot of Republicans would say that this is bad for the country in a larger sense. So any American who now sees the raising of the national debt thanks to minimum wage or something like that, or an influx of immigrants into towns, that actually creates a problem. Could you, for example, have a city in California or one of the cities in Texas that's affected by this? Could their mayor be the person who has standing?
Again, based upon the case law as it currently stands, I just don't see that happening. I just don't see how they're ever going to be able to articulate that person being injured in that situation.
Yeah, they could bring the case 100%, but there's no there's no guarantee that a judge is actually going to hear the case. He might just throw it out immediately.
And you're going to have a problem also with the judiciary is whether or not they're going to want to throw their hat in the ring and say, okay, we're going to grant you standing. Now, every single time there's going to be a question between the House of Representatives and the president,
they're going to be the ones to fight it out.
And it's just everything's going to take
creates
forever.
A lot more work. Nobody likes to do that.
Absolutely. And what a court could say in that regard is that there's no need for judicial intervention in this scenario, because Congress could always use the impeachment power, while it's very unlikely here since we have a Democratic Senate, but that's their remedy. And part of standing is there's no other remedy aside from judicial intervention to bring the case.
I appreciate you guys taking the politics out of this in the sense that there's a lot of political posturing on both sides of this issue, from President Obama, as we saw, from House Speaker Boehner. The question, though, also has to be asked is whether this is simply an academic debate, because it takes a long time for a case to get to the Supreme Court. President Obama only has about 2.5 more years left on his term in office. Does it matter if there's a lawsuit?
I think it does, and here's why. I think there's always a first time for everything. Roe versus Wade, Hobby Lobby. Look at all these cases that set the precedent for the country. This question needs to be answered, and whether or not it's answered at a U.S. District Court level or Supreme Court level, President Obama is going to be long gone.
By the time it gets answered.
No question. But it needs to potentially be, this needs to be cleared up, because you can ask 10 different lawyers this question on where it stands, and you're going to get 5 lawyers that say one thing and 5 lawyers that say another.
And a couple who tell you 2 different things,
exactly.
Right? There we go.
And the thing, and also, this is, like Robert said, the time for John Boehner to, the iron's hot for him to strike. In this regard, the makeup of the Supreme Court, going back to the NLRB Cannon case from earlier, the decision earlier this week, was a unanimous 9-0 decision.
That's rare.
To say, very rare, to say that Obama overreached his executive authority. So
we'll see if the Supreme Court wants to weigh in. In other words, if they're looking for an opportunity, they can.
Obama may be gone, but the Supreme Court
can still do that.
Will be the same.
All right, gentlemen. Robert Schalk, Ben Levine, thanks for being here. At least we had 2 lawyers. We only got 2 opinions. That's a new one. All right, gentlemen. Thanks so much. Arthel?
All right, guys. Thank you very much. An intense rescue operation now underway after the entrance of a gold mine collapses, leaving several workers trapped inside.
And the Dow topping the 17,000 mark for the first time in history following a better than expected jobs report. So why are millions of Americans feeling like they're left behind?
Plus, the Ukrainian government claiming a major victory in its battle against pro-Russian separatists. The very latest on that crisis coming up.